The colony of New Daegu slept under a sky streaked with the soft purple and orange hues of dusk. It was a quiet, orderly place of geodesic domes and low, sturdy buildings built to weather the occasional dust storm. In the central plaza, a few early risers were already setting up stalls for the morning market. Among them was Li Jun, a man with a kind face that didn't quite hide the watchfulness in his eyes. He was arranging data slates for his students when his niece, Choi Yuna, skipped over. "Uncle Jun, do you think the new butterflies have hatched yet?" she asked, her eyes wide. She was small for 8, with a boundless curiosity that made the whole colony feel like a playground. "Maybe later today, Yunia," he said, smiling. "After lessons, we can check." He had left soldiering behind years ago, finding a deeper peace in teaching and in watching Yuna grow. His sister, Park Mina, the colony's only doctor, waved from the doorway of the infirmary, her expression fond. The peace shattered with a sound none of them had ever heard before, a shrieking, metallic roar that tore across the sky. Then another. 3 jagged, obsidian-shaped ships descended like falling knives, blotting out the light. They landed with heavy, ground-shaking thuds at the edges of the plaza. Panicked, silent and cold, froze the colonists for a second before screams erupted. From the ships emerged the Cathar. They were tall, reptilian, with scales the color of dried blood and eyes like yellow glass. They moved with a chilling, coordinated precision, herding the confused humans into the center of the plaza with the barrels of their energy rifles. June pushed Yuna behind him, his body tensing with old instincts. He saw his friend Kim Tae-yun, the engineer, trying to calm a group of terrified techs. A larger Cathar, its scales edged in a command sigil of bronze, strode forward. This was Commander Grau. His voice was a grating hiss, amplified by a translator unit. "This settlement is now a resource asset of the Cathar Empire. You will comply. Resistance is death. Your processing machinery will be taken. You will remain for labor assessment." The colonists huddled together, a murmur of fear and anger rippling through them. The Cathar had a reputation. They were conquerors, scavengers who viewed other species as tools or obstacles. The Terran Union had treaties, had warnings on file about crossing certain lines. But out here, on the frontier, treaties felt like words on a distant wind dot, as Greil detailed his soldiers to begin looting the mineral processors. A small figure wriggled through the crowd of adults. Yuna, her face pale but set with a child's brave confusion, stepped out. She looked up at the towering alien. "Why are you being mean?" Her voice, small and clear, cut through the tense silence. "You could just ask. We share here." For a moment, there was stunned quiet. Then a rough barking sound came from Graal Cathar laughter. "The young mammal speaks. It does not understand its place." He took a heavy step forward, his clawed hand coming out not to strike, but to shove her aside like an inconvenient object. "Silence, biomass." The push was contemptuous, not meant to maim, but Graal was immensely strong. Yuna cried out, stumbling back. Her foot caught on an uneven paving stone. She fell hard, the side of her head striking the ground with a sickening, audible crack. She lay still, a small, crumpled shape, a trickle of blood darkening the dust near her temple. A collective gasp went up from the humans. Mina screamed, "Yuna!" and tried to run forward. 2 Cathar soldiers immediately grabbed her, holding her fast as she struggled. June was already moving, but a rifle barrel slammed into his chest, knocking the wind from him. "Do not interfere," the soldier hissed. Graal glanced at the child, then at the frantic doctor. He made a dismissive flick of his wrist. "The young are fragile. It is of no consequence. Secure the primary processing core." He turned his back, as if Yuna were a piece of broken equipment left on the floor. That act, that casual, absolute indifference, etched itself into June's soul. The fear in the plaza crystallized into something else, a deep, cold, and waiting fury dot as the Cathar marched off. Dragging their stolen machinery, the humans broke free and surged toward Una. Mina finally reached her, her professional training warring with raw terror. Her fingers went to Una's neck. "She's alive," Mina whispered, the words a prayer and a curse. But the head injury... "June, help me." June gently gathered his niece into his arms. She was so light. The blood was warm against his shirt. He followed his sister at a run toward the infirmary, Taeyeon clearing a path ahead. Behind them, the other colonists watched, their faces masks of shock and dawning anger. Inside the infirmary, Mina worked with feverish speed, hooking Una up to monitors, scanning the head wound. June stood frozen, holding Una's small, limp hand. He saw the rise and fall of her chest, too shallow. He heard the steady, low beep of the heart monitor. He made a promise then, speaking the words softly to her unhearing ears. "They will pay, Unaya. I swear it. They will all pay." In the colony's hidden control bunker, sealed behind a false wall in the water recycling plant, a man named Park Jin, the clandestine defense officer, watched the recorded plaza footage. His jaw was clenched so tight it ached. He saw Growl's shove, the fall, the indifference. His fingers flew over a console, entering codes that had never been used. He initiated a sequence called Priority Omega, a deep, subsonic pulse emitted from a beacon buried under the colony's main tower. It was a tiny, powerful signal designed to slip through standard jamming and broadcast channels. It contained the visual record, Growl's biometric signature pulled from the plaza's environmental scanners, and one line of data, asterisk code violation, the human clause. Asset, child. Status, critical. Asterisk, the signal shot into the void. A silent scream of outrage aimed at a specific, hidden point in the dark, back in the plaza. As the last Cathar ship lifted off with its loot, the colony's public address system, still functional, crackled to life. It was Jin's voice, steady and filled with an iron finality that echoed off the silent buildings and the faces of the gathered people. The message was not for them. It was a declaration for the departing ships, and for anyone else who might be listening. Attention, Cathar forces. You have harmed a human child. You were warned. In orbit, Growl heard the translated message on his ship's bridge. He snorted, a puff of air from his nasal slits. "A warning from a broken colony," he said to his subordinate, Lieutenant Sevik. "Their human claws, a pathetic fiction to mask their weakness. They prize their young too highly. It makes them predictable. It makes them soft." Sevik, older and more cautious, watched the planet shrink on the screen. "The stories, Commander. From the old campaigns. It is said they do not forget. That this is the one line they do not allow to be crossed." "Superstition," Growl stated, turning to admire a seized crystal lattice of purified ore. "Today, we have taken what we needed. They did nothing but weep. That is the truth of all species. Only strength matters." Below, in the infirmary, the only sound was the medical equipment and Mina's soft, urgent whispers to her niece. June finally let go of Yuna's hand. He looked at his sister, then at Taeyeon, who stood in the doorway, his face hard. "They think we're soft," June said, his voice quiet and terribly calm. Taeyeon nodded. "They have a very specific definition of strength. They're about to learn ours." June looked back at Una, pale against the white sheets. The waiting was over. The warning had been given, and it had been ignored. Now, something else had to begin. The colony of New Daegu did not sleep. Under the dim, artificial glow of emergency lights, a silent and cold purpose settled over the survivors. The initial shock had burned away, leaving behind something harder. In the infirmary, Park Mina hovered over Choi Yuna. The child lay still in a medical pod, her small face pale under the transparent lid. A soft blue light scanned her head injury repeatedly. Mina's eyes were red-rimmed, but her hands were steady as she adjusted dials, administering drugs to reduce the swelling in Yuna's brain. She did not cry. There was no space for it. Every ounce of her being was focused on one task, pulling her niece back from the edge. The quiet asterisk, beep, beep. Beep asterisk of the heart monitor was the only sound she could bear. Lee Jun stood by the window, looking out at the dark plaza. The market stalls were overturned, goods scattered and forgotten. He could still see the exact spot where Yuna had fallen. His body felt like a coiled spring, a tension so deep it was a physical ache. The image of Commander Grail turning his back played over and over in his mind. Asterisk biomass. Not a priority. Asterisk the words were a fire in his blood. He wasn't a teacher anymore. The man he had built here, the peaceful life, felt like a skin he had shed. Beneath it was the soldier the Terran Union had forged. And that soldier knew one thing. A debt had been created, and it would be paid. Kim Tae-yun entered the infirmary, his clothes smudged with grease and dust. The comms are jammed for normal channels, he said, his voice low. But Jin sent the Omega signal. It's gone. He looked at Yuna in the pod, and his gentle engineer's face tightened. The armory, Jun, the one we're not supposed to know about. The one buried under the geothermal vent. Jun didn't turn from the window. Can you get it open? It has a biometric lock. Colony leadership and retired Union Special Security. Your old designation should work. That made Jun turn. His eyes met Tae-yun's. There was no question, no debate. It was simply the next step. He gave a single, sharp nod. Now, as they moved through the quiet corridors, they saw other colonists. There was no panic now. People were repairing doors, checking on neighbors, moving with a grim efficiency. They nodded to Jun and Tae-yun, their eyes holding a shared understanding. The Kethar had not just stolen from them. They had broken a sacred trust. The air hummed with unspoken rage. The hidden armory was exactly where old colony schematics said it would be, behind a false wall in the lower geothermal maintenance crawlspace. The heat was intense. Before a heavy, seamless door was a scanner pad. Jun placed his palm on it. A red light passed over his hand. Identity, a flat. Automated voice stated, Lee Jun, former sergeant. Terran Union Marine Expeditionary Force. Authorization Sigma 79. There was a pause. Then a heavy clunk as magnetic locks disengaged. The door slid open with a hiss of cooler air. Inside was not an arsenal for an army. It was a hunter's toolkit. There were a dozen sleek, black infantry rifles, but also compact scout drones, monomolecular wire, sensor-masking ponchos, and packs of non-terrestrial biological agents marked for ecosystem analysis. These were tools for deniable operations, for soldiers who needed to move unseen and strike where it hurt most. Jun ran a hand over a rifle's stock. It felt familiar, like an old and hated friend. We're not fighting a war here, Tay, Jun said quietly, picking up a sensor mask. We're sending a message, one they'll understand. Meanwhile, in the cold dark of space, the priority Omega signal traveled. It was a needle of data shot into a haystack of stars, but it knew its destination. It bypassed the usual Union communication hubs, slipping into a dedicated and encrypted channel. On the bridge of the USS Vengeance, a ship painted the color of deep space. Captain Lee Hana was reviewing patrol logs. She was a woman with a calm face and eyes that missed nothing. An alert chimed, a sound she had heard only in drills. On her private screen, the Omega symbol pulsed. She opened the file. She watched the footage from the plaza. She saw the Cathar commander, the shove, the child's fall, the awful, dismissive turn away. She saw the small body on the ground. Her expression did not change, but the temperature on the bridge seemed to drop several degrees. Her first officer, a man named Park, saw her knuckles whiten on the edge of the console. "Helm," Leanna's voice was calm, precise. "Plot an immediate slip-space jump to these coordinates. Maximum burn. Armaments, ready all systems. Comms, open a channel to the Cathar vessel signature, identified in the packet. The Vengeance, a predator lying in wait, turned and powered up its massive drives. Space around it twisted and tore as it plunged into the faster-than-light tunnel dot back in the colony." Growl's second-in-command, Lieutenant Sevik, felt a growing unease. He was overseeing the looting of the mineral processor's core data, but his mind was on the colony's final message. "You were warned. The Cathar had files on humanity. Most were notes on their technology, their colony patterns. But there were older files, fragments from conquered species. Stories of a people who were kind until a specific, unthinkable line was crossed. Then, the stories said, they became something else. A force of nature." He accessed the commander's private log on the ship's network, a breach of protocol. He found GRRL's notes on the raid, asterisk. Human resistance minimal. Their emotional attachment to their young is a critical weakness. Can be used to control populations. The human clause is a bluff. Asterisk Sevik's frills tightened against his skull. A bluff you did not test. He was about to close the log when a new, powerful signal slammed into their ship. It was a direct, uncompromising hail on a Union security frequency. On the main bridge viewer, the face of Captain Lee Hanna appeared. Her demeanor was not one of rage, but of cold, terrifying certainty. Cathar vessel. This is Captain Lee Hanna of the Terran Union ship Vengeance. You have violated Galactic Compact Statute 1, also known as the Human Clause. You have harmed a human child. The penalty was communicated to your government. You have forfeited all protections. On the colony, June and Taeyeon, now carrying packs of equipment, heard this broadcast piped through the colony's still active network. They stopped to listen. Graal, annoyed at the interruption, stepped onto his own bridge. "Human captain," he hissed, "you are interrupting the seizure of lawful resources. Your colony was in violation of Cathar territorial claims." "Your claims are irrelevant," Hanna replied, her voice like ice. "There is only one relevant fact. You hurt a child. You were warned. The promise is now active." Graal laughed, the same barking sound he'd made in the plaza. "Promise? You speak of promises? We have your resources. Your people did nothing. Your promise is empty air. Mercy is weakness. We have proven this." Lee Hanna's head tilted slightly. "You mistake mercy for choice. We choose peace. You have now chosen something else." She leaned forward, her eyes locking with Growl's through the screen. Compliance initiated. The transmission cut. The screen went dark. Growl snorted. "Posture and noise. Ignore it. Continue the extraction." But Sevik felt a chill. "Commander, the term compliance initiated? It is a formal Union term for the execution of a standing order. It is not a threat. It is a statement of fact." "Silence," Growl snapped. Below in the tunnels, June hefted his rifle. He had heard the captain's words. Compliance initiated. He knew what it meant. The machinery of justice, the kind that was written in blood and fire, was now in motion. It was coming from the stars. But it would start here, on the ground, with him. He looked at Taeyeon. They think it's over. They think they won. Tai-yun checked the charge on a shock grenade. What do we do? June started walking, his boots silent on the dusty tunnel floor. We help them understand their mistake, one lesson at a time. The silence on the Caithar ship didn't last. An hour after the transmission ended, the lights on the command bridge flickered. A low, harmonic hum from the engine room shifted pitch, becoming a strained whine. Commander Grau looked up from his screen. Report. Power fluctuation in the secondary grid, Commander. A technician hissed. Cause unknown. It is. Correcting itself. The lights steadied. Grau dismissed it. Coincidence. Human systems were inferior. Their sabotage attempts would be pathetic. He was wrong. The Omega signal had carried more than just video and a warning. It carried a key. A digital skeleton key designed to infiltrate Caithar logic systems, a weapon the Union called a grief seed. It didn't try to blow up the ship. It sought to become part of it. In the officers' quarters, Lieutenant Sevick was trying to rest. The translator node in his room, a small device for understanding alien languages, suddenly sparked to life. It didn't play a Caithar news broadcast or fleet orders. It played a child's voice, clear and confused, followed by the sound of a terrible impact, then a woman's scream of Yuna. It played it once, then again, and began to loop. Sevick ripped the device from the wall. The speakers in the corridor outside took over, the small, haunting audio clip echoing down the empty hall. On the bridge, communication alerts began to ping. Soldiers on the planet's surface were checking in, their voices tight with confusion. Patrol Gamma has not returned from the eastern perimeter sweep. They are overdue. Grawl scowled. Probably looted some human trinket and lost track of time. Send another patrol to find them and bring them to order. Down on New Daegu, the night was absolute. The colony's main power was offline, but the geothermal vents provided a faint, shifting glow from service hatches and a low, ambient heat. Patrol Delta, 4 Caithar soldiers, moved cautiously through the industrial sector. Their leader, a veteran named Koss, felt uneasy. The humans were hiding, he knew. But the silence felt watchful, not empty. Watch the overhead piping, Koss hissed, his rifle lights sweeping across a network of steam-caked tubes. One of his soldiers, a younger recruit, stepped forward to look down a narrow alley between 2 processor buildings. There was a soft twang. The recruit froze, then made a wet, gurgling sound. A near-invisible line of monomolecular wire, stretched across the alley at throat height, was now embedded in his scales. He fell, clutching his neck. Before Koss could react, a shape dropped from the pipes above. It was human, clad in a black, sensor-masking poncho that blurred its edges. It landed on the second soldier, and there was a brief, brutal struggle in near silence, ended by the sharp crack of a neck. Koss fired his rifle, the searing bolt of energy lighting up the alley. It hit nothing. The shape was gone. He and his last remaining soldier back to back, their lights jerking around wildly. They heard a scrape of boots on metal above them. They fired upward. The steam from a ruptured pipe filled the air, a thick, hot fog. A canister clinked at their feet, hissing softly. Not an explosive. A gas. It smelled sickly sweet. Their vision swam, their muscles locking. They collapsed, paralyzed but conscious. Li Jun dropped down in front of them, his face covered by a mask. He didn't shoot them. He knelt by Koss, whose eyes tracked him with terrified fury. Jun took the soldier's own comm unit. He leaned close, his voice a flat, translated whisper in Koss's ear. "Tell your commander," Jun said. "We are not hiding. We are hunting. You were warned." Then he was gone, vanishing into the steam and shadows, leaving the two soldiers alive in the fog. Unable to move or call for help back on the ship, the systems were unraveling. The main computer console on the bridge began displaying the colony's plaza footage on a secondary screen. No one commanded it. It just played. Growl roared and smashed the screen. Another screen began to play it. The grief seed was weaving the incident into the very operating system. A ghost in the machine. The new patrol sent to find Patrol Gamma returned, missing one of their own. Their report was a jumble of confusion, shadows that moved wrong, sounds from the vents, a feeling of being watched from the dark. One soldier mentioned a symbol scrawled on a wall in what looked like Cathar blood. It was not a human word. It was a rough translation of their own warning glyphs. It meant you were warned. Grau finally felt the first cold trickle of doubt. This was not the behavior of a broken, soft species. This was the behavior of something that knew how to inflict fear. He called a strategy meeting. Lieutenant Sevik stood before him, his frills clamped tight with anxiety. "The old texts, Commander," Sevik urged, his voice low. "The ones from the H-Car ruins before they were erased. They spoke of a species that were compassion as skin. But beneath it was a core of frozen fire. To harm their young was to crack that skin. What emerged was not soldiers. It was vengeance given form. They did not fight for land or resources. They fought to erase the offense. Completely. Superstition and fear tailies." Growl slammed a fist on the table. "The humans are using tricks. Guerrilla tactics. They are desperate. They are not targeting our equipment, Commander," Sevik pressed. "They are targeting us. They are leaving survivors to spread fear. They are using our own blood to write messages. This is psychological warfare of a high order. This is what the compliance signal meant. They are making us compliant with their will. Through terror." Growl's eyes burned with anger, but also with a new, ugly emotion, the fear that his subordinate might be right, and that being right meant he, Growl, had doomed them all. He could not allow that doubt to spread. "Your fear is a disease, Lieutenant," Growl hissed, standing tall. "You contaminate our resolve with ancient ghost stories. You question my command over the whispers of a dead race." He drew his sidearm, a heavy plasma pistol. The other officers in the room went very still. "Commander, I only seek," Sevik began. "The only thing you seek is to hide from a fight with a weaker species," Growl interrupted, his voice cold. "Your cowardice is a greater threat than any human trap." He raised the pistol. Sevik did not beg. He looked at his commander, and in his yellow eyes was not fear of death, but a terrible certainty. "You have killed us all," he said softly. Grell fired. The blast was loud in the closed room. Lieutenant Sevik fell to the deck, dead. A wisp of smoke rose from his chest. Grail holstered his weapon, looking at the shocked faces of his remaining officers. "Let that be a lesson. We are Cathar. We do not fear. We do not regret. We conquer." He turned to the main viewer, showing the dark colony below. "Prepare a full ground assault at dawn. We will burn them out of their holes. We will show them what real strength is." But as he gave the orders, a soft looping whisper played from the bridge's main speaker, just loud enough for him to hear. Asterisk. "Why are you being mean? Why are you being mean?" Asterisk. He ignored it. But the officers around him heard it. They exchanged glances. The story of Sevik's warning and his execution would spread through the crew faster than any virus. The cracks in Growl's command were no longer hidden. They were widening into chasms, and from the planet below, the hunters watched and waited for the dawn. Dawn on New Daydew was not a sunrise. It was a bruise of ugly orange light on the horizon, choked by smoke rising from the Cathar ship's thrusters. Commander Growl had made good on his threat. 5 heavy assault landers detached from the main vessel, descending like black stones towards the colony's outskirts. They carried the bulk of his remaining ground force, armored and angry, ready to purge the human infestation with plasma and claw. Li Jun watched them come from a vantage point in the geothermal vent superstructure. He saw the tactical formation. It was a brute force hammer blow, meant to flatten and burn. He keyed his small, hard-lined comb. Tay, they're going for the main habitation dome. The vents are live? From deep underground, Kim Taeyeon's voice crackled back. The primary release valves are open. It's a pressure cooker down here. Say the word. Let the first wave land, June said, his voice calm. Then give them a taste of our fire. The Cathar landers touched down in the dusty field beside the main colony dome. Ramps slammed down. Growl himself strode out, flanked by his elite guard. Level it, he roared. Leave nothing standing. As the first squads charged forward, the ground beneath them shuddered, not from an explosion, but from a deep, groaning roar. Then, with a sound like the planet itself screaming, a dozen massive geothermal release valves blew open in a ring around the landing zone. Towers of superheated steam, rock, and boiling water erupted into the sky. It was not a weapon meant to kill them all. It was a weapon meant to scatter, confuse, and blind. The orderly assault dissolved into chaos. The scalding fog swallowed squads whole. Cathar soldiers screamed as their armor grew blisteringly hot. Visibility dropped to 0. Communications dissolved into static-filled panic dot in the chaos. The shadows moved. June and the other colony veterans, now 12 in total, slipped into the steam. They were not an army facing an army. They were wolves taking isolated sheep. A Cathar soldier, stumbling and disoriented, would feel a hand clamp over his muzzle and a blade find the gap in his neck armor. A pair separated from their unit would hear a whisper from the fog, then the sharp crack of a close-range rifle shot. The hunters used the environment perfectly, striking and melting away before a response could form. Grail bellowed orders, but his commands were lost in the din. He fired his pistol into the fog, hitting nothing. He was a warrior built for ship-to-ship combat or commanding from a bridge. This intimate, terrifying hunt was alien to him. For the first time, he felt a prickling fear on his scales. He retreated towards the relative safety of his landed ship, his guard closing around him. Fall back to the secondary extraction point. Regroup. But the secondary point was also a trap Taeyeon had prepared. Abandoned ground cars, rigged with stolen Cathar energy cells, exploded as the retreating soldiers passed, cutting off their retreat and carving the remaining force into isolated pockets. Above, the Cathar mothership detected a new slipspace signature. One signature. The USTS Vengeance emerged from the void not with a fleet, but alone. It was larger and of a darker, more menacing design than the Cathar vessel. It did not hail them. It did not demand surrender. It simply moved with a chilling purpose into attack range. Evasive maneuvers, the Cathar weapons officer shouted. Target the human ship, all batteries. The Vengeance did not fire its main cannons. Instead, a swarm of pods, shaped like sharp black teeth, shot from its belly. They were not missiles. They were boarding pods made of a dense radar-absorbent material. The Cathar point defense lasers tried to track them, but the pods moved with erratic, jerking motions, and their armor absorbed glancing hits. They slammed into the Cathar, hull with a sound like giant fists pounding, and immediately began to burrow, acidic cutters melting through the metal plates. Inside the Cathar ship, alarms klaxons howled. Breach! Decks 7, 9, and 12. Hull integrity compromised. Then the lights went out entirely, replaced by pulsing red emergency strips. The grief seed virus had finally seized full control, shutting down primary power. The humans were coming aboard. They came silently, not in the bright armor of Union Marines, but in the same black sensor-masked gear June wore below. They moved in coordinated pairs, clearing corridors with brutal efficiency. They did not take prisoners. They did not shout challenges. They used suppressed weapons, blades, and their hands. The Cathar, trained for ship combat and ground assaults, were not prepared for close-quarters extermination in the dark of their own ship. The invaders knew the ship's layout from the hacked database. They moved with a terrible certainty. On the planet, Growl and his 6 remaining personal guards had fought their way to the Central Mineral Processor Building, a massive fortified structure. It was the only place not shrouded in steam. He believed he could fortify it, call for extraction from his ship. He sealed the heavy doors behind him, breathing heavily. The main processing floor was a cathedral of silent machinery. The only light came from high, dusty windows. Growl heard a soft click. Then, from the shadows of the gantries above, a single figure rappelled down. It landed softly in the center of the open floor. Li Jun. He had shed his poncho. He wore simple combat gear. In his hands was not a rifle, but a long, unpowered blade of black metal, its edge seeming to drink the light. Grell hissed, a sound of pure hatred. "The teacher, you are the one causing this trouble." June didn't answer. He just stood there, waiting. "Kill him." Growl ordered his guards. The 6 Cathar charged. June moved. He wasn't faster than them, but he was precise. He used their momentum against them, his blade a flickering extension of his will. He didn't block the powerful swings of their energy axes. He deflected them, stepped inside their guard, and struck at joints, eyes, throats. It was not a glorious fight. It was ugly, personal, and final. One guard fell, then another. June took a glancing blow to his ribs that burned, but he didn't make a sound. He just kept moving, a machine of focused retribution. Within minutes, all 6 guards lay still on the floor. Grell stared, his confidence shattering. He raised his plasma pistol and fired. June sidestepped, the blast scorching the floor. He began to walk towards Grell, slowly. Grired again and again. June kept coming, a calm, unstoppable advance. The pistol's power cell died with a dull click. Growl threw it at June, who batted it aside without breaking stride. With a roar of desperation, Growl drew his own ceremonial vibroblade and lunged. The clash was brief. June parried a wild strike, swept Growl's legs out from under him, and planted a boot on his weapon hand, crushing it against the deck. The commander's blade clattered away. June knelt, putting his face close to Growl's. He could smell the alien's fear. "You thought we were weak," June said, his voice quiet, each word a hammer blow. "You thought a child's life was nothing. You were wrong. My ship, my crew." Growl gasped. "Are being erased," June finished. He hauled Growl to his feet, not gently. He bound the commander's hands with a polymer strap. "You don't get to die yet. You don't get to hide from what you've done. You need to see this." He dragged the defeated commander out of the building, towards the colony infirmary. Growl, beaten and broken, could only stumble along. The sounds of fighting from his ship had gone silent. The sky was empty. The Vengeance hung there, dark and complete. His own ship was dark, its hull scarred with entry wounds. It was dead. June pushed him into the infirmary. Parkmina looked up, her eyes going from her brother's bleeding side to the captured alien commander. She said nothing, her expression stone. June forced Growl to his knees before the central medical pod. Inside, Choi Yuna lay, still and pale, her head bandaged, her breathing assisted by a machine. The soft, steady beep of her heart monitor filled the room. "Look," June commanded, his hand on Growl's shoulder, forcing him to look. "This is the biomass you ignored. This is the no consequence. Look at her." Grail looked at the small, fragile human child. He saw the machines keeping her alive. He finally understood the enormity of his error. It wasn't about military strength. It was about value. They valued this one small life above his ship, above his crew, above him. And they had the will and the power to prove it. A cold, absolute dread filled him, colder than the void of space. On the main screen of the Vengeance's bridge, a feed from the infirmary played. Captain Lee Hanna watched the captured commander on his knees before the child. She gave a small, satisfied nod. The first phase was complete. The lesson had been delivered. Now, it was time to deliver the bill. The silence in space was absolute. The Caithar ship hung dead in the void, dark and scarred. No life signals came from it. The UST's Vengeance floated nearby, a silent sentinel. On the surface of New Daegu, the surviving Caithar soldiers, leaderless and terrified, had been rounded up and disarmed by the colonists. They were not placed in cages. They were simply ignored, left sitting in the dusty plaza under the watchful eyes of armed humans who showed no anger, only a cold, focused disregard. It was more frightening than any shout dot in the infirmary. Commander Gra remained on his knees. Lee Jun stood beside him, a hand resting on his shoulder not as a comfort, but as a weight to keep him in place. Park Mina monitored Yuna's vital signs, her back to the alien, her very posture a dismissal. The beep of the heart monitor was the only sound. Then, the main com screen in the infirmary lit up. It split into two displays. On one side was Captain Lee Hanna of the Vengeance, her face impassive. On the other, after a delay filled with static, appeared the scaled, aged visage of the Caithar Supreme Commander, Vorlek. His yellow eyes took in the scene, his own commander kneeling, the human child in the medical pod. The silent human soldiers. "You have attacked a Caithar sovereign vessel," Vorlek hissed, his voice attempting its usual menace, but undercut by a thread of confusion. "This was not a standard military engagement. We have enforced a law," Captain Hanna replied, her tone conversational, as if discussing the weather. "Galactic Compact Statute 1, the Human Clause. Your subordinate, Commander Grau, violated it. The penalty was known to you. The warning was given. It was ignored." Vorlek's frills twitched. "A minor incident with a primitive colon.